That day, the air smelled of fallen leaves and a light, almost invisible dampness. Autumn in Seattle could be especially persistent, penetrating into the skin through the coat, into the thoughts through the hustle. I was standing at the kindergarten counter, holding a ballpoint pen tightly in my hand and trying not to drop the folder with Evan's drawings on the floor. An employee in a blue sweater handed me a form to sign with an absent-minded smile. I filled in the name and date, ticked the box next to picked up and was about to hand the sheet back when the phone vibrated in my bag. A small tremor, almost like a familiar reminder, or a missed call from Charles. I pulled it out as usual, already anticipating a short message along the lines of "What should I take home?" Or "Will you order dinner yourself?" But the screen, illuminated by a harsh blue light, highlighted something else. Something that made the world stop breathing. I'm going to Portugal with Clara. I transferred all the money to my account. Good luck with the apartment. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. It took me a moment to realize what I was reading. I was just watching. The text was simple, matter of fact, written as if by a stranger. Without emotion, without explanation. Every word is a guillotine. My name was cut out of this equation of life as an unnecessary symbol. His fingers gripped the phone tighter, as if they could squeeze another, correct message out of it. I reread it again. And again. No, I was not mistaken. "Mom, do we have dinosaur cookies?" Evan's voice came from below. He tugged at my jacket sleeve, looking up at me with that sincere confidence that Mom always has cookies and the right answers. I lowered my eyes, forced a smile, and grabbed his elbow. "Of course there is, kid. Let's go." I took his hand and led him through the hall. He was talking about how he was building a tower of cubes today, but I didn't hear him. Charles's every word throbbed in his temples like an alarm. I'm leaving. Portugal. Clara. Money. Good luck. I was catching my breath like a fish stranded on a beach. Not here, not in front of the baby. We need to get to the car. Just go. We went out into the drizzling rain, and I automatically pulled back Evan's hood and buckled him into the car seat. He was humming some silly song about tyrannosaurs while I was sitting at the wheel, pressed against the back of the seat and looking ahead through the fogged windshield. It took me a moment to realize that the engine wasn't on. Only the drops on the glass, the phone on his lap, and the growing silence inside, as dull as underwater. I'm Jenna Brooks, 30, 6 years old. I am an editor, a woman who always knew how to build a structure, a plot, a rhythm. But at that moment, I didn't even know what to say to my child. What to tell yourself. Charles, my husband, partner, and father of my child, just disappeared. He's not dead. I didn't have an accident. He's gone. With another woman. He left me with my son, with an empty account and the rent that needs to be paid in 3 days. There was no apology or explanation in the message. Just dry composure, as if I were a logistical task that he was handing over to a new department. Later, at home, I sat Evan down in front of the TV with his favorite Dino Rescuers, brewed strong coffee myself and sat down at the kitchen table, dialing the bank number with trembling fingers. A few minutes later, after a lot of buttons and electronic voices, a representative contacted me. Yes, Mrs. Brooks. We can confirm that the balance in the joint savings account has been transferred to another account. In whose name is this account registered? My voice was hoarse. In the name of Charles Brooks. I'm sorry, but since he was the account holder along with you, the transaction is legitimate. I hung up the phone and opened the banking app. There were $347 and a few cents in the checking account. We pay $2,000 a month for this apartment. There's an unpaid electricity bill in the kitchen drawer. And our fridge is half empty. In a daze, I got up, went into the bedroom, and picked up my old laptop. I opened my email. Maybe he wrote. Maybe it's a mistake. Something that can be explained? But all that was waiting for me, there was emptiness. No letters. Just old reminders, bills, and one promotional newsletter from the publisher. The phone rang. Charles's mother. I didn't pick up the phone right away. My heart sank. I knew this wasn't going to be a supportive conversation. I picked it up. Jenna, Margaret's cold voice cut right through my nerves. What are you doing? Please. Charles says you refused to let him see Evan. He said you were blackmailing him with child support. I knew you were tough, but I didn't think you were that tough. I was silent. For the first few seconds, she couldn't figure out where she got so much conviction from. Then it hit me. He had already told her his version. He didn't just run away, he built a legend. A scenario in which he is a father, exiled by an evil ex, unfairly accused and driven to despair. And I'm an evil witch, robbing him of his son. Charles went to Europe with another woman, I finally said. He took all the money. And he left me alone with the baby. Those are your words. And he's got messages from you threatening him. She was almost spitting into the phone. I won't let you destroy my family. Margaret, he made it up. He's gone. My voice trailed off. I realized that I was talking to a blank wall. When the call ended, I was sitting in the dark of the kitchen, listening to Evan laughing at a cartoon in the next room. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The tears came, but I didn't let them fall. I couldn't afford it, not now. Instead, I opened my phone again and reread the message. I'm going to Portugal with Clara. I transferred all the money to my account. Good luck with the apartment. I suddenly realized that there was no chance in these words. There is a calculation in them. They contain the final point. But that wasn't the point for me. That was the opening line. A line from another story. Sometimes it all starts with a glance across the room, casual but insistent, as if someone knows you're going to be part of their plan. I first saw Charles at the Austin Book Fair, surrounded by dozens of tables, noisy presentations, the smells of coffee and laminated paper. He was standing at the booth of a publishing house that competed with ours, talking to a group of people as if he were illuminating them from the inside. His smile, his gestures, his voice, everything about him attracted me. I tried not to look in his direction, concentrating on my notebook, but I felt him looking at me. And when I looked up, our eyes met. He nodded as if he were an old acquaintance. Later, at the end of the day, he came over. Not with a banal phrase, but with a question about my opinion on the new Morgan Finch trilogy. I replied with irony. He laughed openly, a little hoarsely, as if he really found something interesting in me. We chatted for almost an hour amid the hustle, books, and sunsets, and then exchanged numbers. Charles was good at getting things done. Bouquets of daisies, tickets to performances, conversations until midnight about the meaning of the finales and the meaning of silence between the lines. 6 months later, we were standing on a cliff in the mountains of Montana, the wind blowing through our veils, and our voices were surrounded by pine trees and close friends. He held my hand as if he promised never to let go. The first years were like a gentle sunrise, warm, clear, intense. We lived in Denver. I was promoted to senior editor at Maple Press, and he moved to a marketing agency, where he quickly rose through the ranks. We traveled: San Diego, New York, Rome. For the first time, we felt like a team, and not just a couple. We made plans, discussed which house we wanted, which neighborhood would have the best school, which dog we would get when the time came. When I got pregnant, we decided to move to Seattle, closer to Charles's parents, and the rhythm of the city seemed more suitable for the child. Evan was born in the spring. His first cry awakened something ancient and unshakable in me, something that no career could replace. I decided to leave my full-time job for a while and take up freelance, editing texts from home while he sleeps. Charles said, "That's right. I can handle the finances. You need to be with him. I believed it. He looked sincere. At that time, his income was really enough. Then he offered to sell the house. The market is at its peak right now, he argued. We can raise a good amount, invest in Jeff's business. Everything will go off. We'll buy a house twice as big in a year. I hesitated, but he looked so confident, so caring again. We sold out. The money went into the startup, which collapsed 8 months later. It happens, he said. The world is unpredictable. We will return everything. I shrugged my shoulders. Failures happen in life. I'm used to the idea that growth requires risk. But after this setback, something changed. Charles became distant. He stayed late at work without explaining, came home distracted, annoyed, without looking me in the eye. Sometimes I caught him hiding his phone, taking the screen away from me, going into another room if someone was calling. I asked once, "Is this all work?" He didn't blink. "The client has a crisis. I don't want to load you up." I nodded. I always nodded. Even when strange amounts began to appear on bank statements, dinner at a restaurant we hadn't gone to together, hotels in the city center, when he said he was spending the night at the office. The explanations were convincing. He spoke confidently, looking straight into the eyes. And I wanted to believe. Because faith was easier than destruction. 2 weeks before he disappeared, I came across a travel guide to Lisbon in the bottom drawer of his desk. With a cover worn from use, with pages marked with bookmarks. I picked it up, feeling the familiar burning sensation between my shoulder blades, the way it does when you feel betrayed. "What's that?" I asked, holding up the guidebook. He grinned and shrugged his shoulders. "I was just wondering. Maybe someday we'll go. I like to know the place in advance." I didn't believe it. Or rather, she didn't want to believe it. The lie slid between us like a snake, but I let it stay. I was afraid that if I started digging, a hole would open up that I couldn't get out of. Meanwhile, he was preparing an escape. When everything collapsed, and I went to his office, hoping that there had been a mistake, that this was a dream, I was met by a young woman in a strict cardigan. She frowned when I asked about Charles. "I'm sorry, but Charles Brooks doesn't work for us anymore. He quit, let me see, yes, exactly 2 weeks ago." But I swallowed. He was here on Monday. Maybe he came for his things. But yesterday was the last day according to the documents. I went outside as if in a dream. The world seemed rubbery, the sound of footsteps was muffled. The rain began to fall like a mockery. While I was buying milk, picking Evan up, and looking for a new jacket for him for the fall, my husband was planning an escape. Not with me, not from something, but from us. I called Tom, the only one of his friends I respected. The one Charles worked with back in Denver. We saw each other on holidays, he knew Evan, laughed with us at dinner. "Hey, Tom. This is Jenna. I need to know. Did you know?" A long silence. He made me promise. He said he needed a clean break. A complete breakup. I gripped the phone so tightly that my fingers turned white. I told him it was crazy. He thinks it's for the best. That you and Evan will be safe without him. That he's dragging you down. Did he say that? Yes. He thinks he's found someone who will give him a chance to start over. I blacked out. I sat on the side of the road, watching the rain slowly erase my footprints on the asphalt. Then I understood. Everything that seemed real was a set. And cracks had been creeping behind it for a long time. But I didn't notice them. Or she didn't want to. The morning began with a subtle knock on the door. The postman, a polite man with gray temples and a good-natured face, handed me a signed envelope. His fingers were cold, as if they had absorbed all the October chill. I thanked him automatically, slammed the door, and looked down at the thick white envelope with the neat typewritten lettering, Jenna Brooks. The handwriting of fate. I tore up the paper with that mechanical concentration that appears only at moments when the subconscious already knows what will be inside. A petition for divorce. Submitted in advance. With an attached power of attorney from his lawyer. The wording was dry, as if it had been cut out of a legal reference book. He renounced any parental rights to Evan. He did not claim custody, did not ask for dates. He didn't want to see his son. Never again. The conclusion stated that, according to him, I have sufficient financial resources to cover all expenses, and therefore he does not consider himself obligated to pay alimony. The words jumped along the lines, lost their outlines. I sat on the edge of the sofa, the paper trembling in my hands like a leaf of an autumn tree before falling. The tears came instantly, but they were strange, not soft, warm from the pain, but burning, like from a blow. It wasn't a cry of grief. It was a cry of rage. He thought I was going to break down. That this piece of paper will become a point in my power. That after taking everything, he took me too. He was mistaken. Within a couple of hours, I was sitting across from Karen Lee, a lawyer recommended to me by a friend who had gone through a painful divorce. Her office was in a corner of an old red brick building at Pine and 8th. It smelled of coffee, archival paper, and menthol. Karen was a short woman with silver hair pulled back in a bun and a tenacious, penetrating gaze that reflected experience and patience. I told her everything. Without hiding, without exaggerating. About the message, about the bills, about Clara. About his sudden disappearance, about the lies, about his mother covering for him. His actions are in a gray area, she said, sorting through the papers with practiced precision. It's not a crime, but it's not perfect behavior either. The judge will see it. He left us penniless. The account was shared. It will be in your favor. But in order to receive alimony, especially in an emergency, we need to prove that he continues to work and is not in a difficult financial situation. I do not know where he is now. He just left for Portugal. And everything. Then we'll have to look for footprints. Anything that can confirm his current income, even indirectly. Messages, correspondence, old letters, anything that might hint at his new place of work. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me for the first time in days. Not a hope. Determination. When I got home, I put Evan to bed with a book about marine dinosaurs. He loved it when I portrayed whole scenes with my voices. While he was falling asleep, his palm pressed tightly against me, I mentally sorted through the drawers, folders, passwords. At night, when the rain was raging outside the windows, I returned to Charles's desk. I opened drawer after drawer, sorting through the papers, until in one of them, between the instructions from the old printer and the pizza coupon, I found a postcard. A simple one with an image of an old European tram. There's a familiar handwriting inside. Mom, thank you for your help with the deposit for an apartment in Lisbon. Clara and I couldn't have done it without you. We promise, everything will be new. I kiss you, CH. The date is 3 months ago. That was before he started talking to me about the difficulties at work, before he said he was tired, before his sudden departures. Margaret knew. Moreover, she helped. She financed our collapse with her own hands. I took photos. She carefully put the postcard back. He did not suspect that she could become evidence. Later, I went up to the attic where the old documents were kept. Among the boxes of Christmas tree toys and college books, I found a plastic folder with papers that he once asked me not to throw away, supposedly just in case. There, between the insurance and the old tax forms, was a printed resume. Clara Huntley. And below is a motivation letter addressed to a certain Meridian Global Portugal. I looked at him like an archaeologist looking at evidence of an ancient conspiracy. The date of sending the resume was recent. About a month before the day he disappeared. And in the lower corner of the letter is a note, accepted. The start of work is on September 12th. I grabbed my phone and took pictures of each page. My breathing was labored, but not from panic. It was a feeling similar to hunting excitement. We got a lead. He got a job at a new company just 2 days after he sent me that message. So he didn't just run away, he started a new life, a new career, perhaps with a new status. This means that he is able to pay. The next morning, I showed all the finds to Karen. She was scanning documents, making notes in a notebook. "That's exactly what we need," she said at last. "We can use this as the basis for an emergency petition. Plus, we can request information about his official employment through an international channel. It will take time, but it will give results. He will not escape responsibility." I nodded, without looking away. "Good. Get started." We exchanged glances. In her eyes, I saw what I had long wanted to feel in myself again: respect. She wasn't looking at a victim. Not a woman who was abandoned and deceived. And the mother who decided to fight. A man who doesn't give up. The resistance has begun. The sky that morning was low and leaden, as if the city knew in advance that a storm was ahead. I drove to the county courthouse with a feeling that is hard to describe, a mixture of anxiety, determination, and fatigue, squeezed into a tight ball at the solar plexus. Evans stayed with a neighbor, who, fortunately, already knew what it meant to be a single mother, and without asking questions, took him to her with toys and pancakes. I sat in the car, facing the concrete facade of the building, which seemed impenetrable, and tried to convince myself that everything I had done in recent days mattered. Which really means something else. Karen was already waiting for me inside. She was packed as always, with a notebook, tablet, and a leather bag that always smelled of lavender. She looked at me and nodded. Without words. We knew that now was not the time for words, but for action. We have filed petitions, an urgent hearing, a temporary asset freeze, a demand for alimony and financial statements. Karen confidently listed each item, and there was a businesslike clarity in her voice. The judge, a middle-aged woman with hard eyes and a voice that seemed to have been honed over the years of hearings, was carefully examining the documents. For the first time since Charles's escape, I felt like I wasn't alone. That the system can become an ally if you approach it with facts rather than emotions. But as soon as I began to believe that the day would go according to plan, the doors of the hall opened and she appeared in them. Margaret. Her steps were honed, as if they had been rehearsed at a parade, crisp, cold. She was wearing a gray tweed suit and pearl earrings, too luxurious for simple listening, but perfect for the role: stern, noble, judgmental. I knew that look. She looked at me the same way on our wedding day. It was as if she saw in my love for her son not an alliance, but an encroachment. "Mrs. Brooks," she said with cold politeness, leaning toward me. "You can play this role as much as you want. But in the end, everything will fall into place." Karen, without looking up from her tablet, replied without pathos. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Brooks. We were just planning to call you as a witness. Your financial support for Charles at the time of his escape is of particular interest to the court." Margaret almost flinched, but quickly regained her composure. "I'm just a mother who wants to help her son." "Of course," Karen nodded. "And the court will be very interested to know exactly how you did it." The hearing went quickly. Karen provided a copy of the postcard, bank confirmations of the transfer of funds, Clara's resume, their joint letters, and the dates of their employment in Lisbon. The judge was poring over papers, asking clarifying questions. Then, with cold confidence, she said, "The court grants the request for a temporary freeze of all joint assets." Charles Brooks is also required to begin paying temporary alimony until the final proceedings are completed. The next hearing is scheduled in 14 days. I wasn't smiling. It wasn't a victory, it was a respite. But at that moment, for the first time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. Not on the shifting sand of fear, but on the truth, laid out by documents and confirmed by law. But the joy didn't last long. The next morning, when I was just pouring myself a cup of coffee, a call from a Portuguese number broke the silence of the kitchen. I answered, thinking it might have been Charles or someone from him. But the voice was female, with a slight accent. "Good afternoon. Is this Jenna Brooks?" "Yes." "Who's talking?" "My name is Inez Mendoza. I am a representative of the Human Resources Department of Meridian Global in Lisbon. I'm calling about Charles Brooks. We would like to clarify the information we have received from you." "Excuse me? I didn't send any emails." Pause. The sound of pages being flipped. "We have a statement signed by your name stating that Mr. Brooks is under investigation and is involved in a custody dispute, which may result in legal liability for the company if it continues to cooperate with him. Copies of documents are attached to the letter, a marriage certificate, tax forms, and a notice of divorce." I was speechless. It was all at my place. Only one other person besides me had access to these documents. Margaret. When she came to support me in the first week, when I was upset and Evan was sick, when she stayed with him while I was running around banks and lawyers, she asked the computer to look at the mail or print out a prescription. I didn't think about it at the time, but now the puzzle has come together. "Miss Mendoza, this letter is not from me. Someone used my personal data without my knowledge. I understand. We will have to fix it. We also wanted to inform you that Mr. Brooks has been fired effective today due to providing false information during the hiring process." "I'm sorry, is he fired?" "Yes. According to our policy, any legal conflicts that are not disclosed at the stage of signing the contract violate the terms of employment." I thanked him and hung up, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. I was left speechless. Firing Charles meant depriving him of his income. And without income, he will be able to declare in court that he is unable to pay alimony. This attack was not accidental. It was a carefully calculated setup. Karen replied a minute after I sent her all the information. "This is identity fraud," she said, her voice strained. "We will file a new petition. This is an interference with a court order. An act of sabotage that we can document. But, Jenna, we need the original of this letter. And we need to figure out where she got the documents. She came to my house. Several times. I was sitting with Evan. She asked for a laptop. I didn't think about it then. Think about what else she might have seen. We must close all the loopholes. And this," she added after a pause, "is just the beginning. The confrontation becomes personal." I hung up, feeling an icy anger creep under my skin. Margaret wasn't just protecting her son, she was destroying my reputation, my chances, my life. She played court like chess, and it seemed to her that she was always a few moves ahead. But she forgot one thing. I am a mother. And mothers don't give up. The phone rang in the silence, breaking the evening gloom that enveloped the house. Evan was already asleep, his breathing steady and deep, coming from behind the half-open bedroom door. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of unfinished tea and wondering where to start the next day. A conversation with the bank, new documents for Karen, another to-do list in which there was no room for ordinary life. A name flashed up on the phone screen, Charles. "You fired me," he growled, not even waiting for my reply. "You ruined my career, Jenna. You don't understand what you've done." "Me?" My voice was calm, even though everything inside was clenched. "I haven't written anywhere. It wasn't me. The only person who had access to my documents was your mother. The silence, on the other hand, was long and hollow, as if he was really considering this possibility for the first time. But then again, stubbornness, anger. This is absurd. Mom would never. Charles, I interrupted softly. She copied my documents. The email was written from my computer. When she came to support me. Look at the facts. He hung up the phone. I dropped my head into my hands, my heart pounding like a hammer. 10 minutes later, a message arrived. Not an apology. Not an explanation. And the screenshots. Correspondence between him and Margaret. Dated a few months ago. As I read them, I felt my breath catch with every word. As soon as we settle down, we will be able to file a petition. Her history of depression will give us every reason to lose custody. We will be able to show the court that she is unstable. We have documents, letters from the therapist. It will work. My postpartum depression, the painful path I had traveled, the darkness I had pulled myself out of, was turned into a weapon against me. My tears, sleepless nights, my notebooks filled with thoughts and fears, exposed in therapy sessions, were now used as arguments to take my son away. I filed a new petition the next day. Karen listened attentively as I told her the contents of the correspondence. It's a conspiracy. This is interference in the judicial process. And that's a crime. We'll file on all counts, Jenna. We need more, I said. We have to find the money he's hiding. He wasn't going to spend his whole life without an income. He just pretended. Karen nodded. Do you know where to look? I called Tom. He answered quickly, his voice strained, as if he was waiting for my call. He was talking about offshore accounts, he confessed. The Caribbean, I think. He said that he had opened an account a long time ago. Margaret helped. I thought he was joking. And then. I just didn't say anything. I thanked him, even though my voice was shaking. When I got home, I sat down at my laptop. Charles has always been lazy in choosing passwords. Evan's date of birth, our initials, the year of the wedding. I tried 3 options and ended up in his cloud storage. What I saw froze in my eyes. Screenshots of transfers to offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Letters from consultants, instructions on hiding assets. The documents, entitled Custody Strategy, outlined steps to undermine my parental status. Correspondence with Clara. With Margaret. A cold-blooded plan made by the two of them how to get rid of me while preserving everything else: freedom, money, control over Evan. I gave everything to Karen. 2 days later, we managed to block the account. It was the first serious victory. But soon a new figure appeared. Clara. Jackie, as she introduced herself in the first months of our life in Seattle. She called me unexpectedly. Her voice was strangled, frightened. Jenna, I need to talk. With you? I was surprised. After everything? I didn't know. I swear it. He's becoming different. He's aggressive. I'm afraid. Are you afraid? The bitterness in his voice echoed off the walls. After you started all this with him? I didn't know that he was hiding money even from me. He said we have a second account. In Liechtenstein. There are more than 200,000. And this is in case the first one is blocked. He's got it all figured out, Jenna. But now he's lost his job. And he starts to break down. Why are you telling me this? Because he becomes unpredictable. I don't want to be next. I'll help you. But I need protection. Immunity. I don't want to go to jail. I gave everything to Karen. We have drawn up an agreement. She gives us the documents in exchange for immunity. In the evening, She sent copies of bank statements, letters with passwords, and transfer confirmations. And that's when we filed a motion for an injunction. Urgently. Charles was going to come back, and we knew this would be our chance. His plane landed in Seattle early in the morning. He thought that he would come, enter our house, perhaps persuade me to settle everything peacefully. But he was met by airport security officers with a no-approach order, a subpoena, and a notice to block all accounts. When he tried to call me, his voice was barely a rasp. "What the hell does that mean, Jenna?" "It means," I said calmly, "that everything you've hidden is no longer yours. The judge is expecting you tomorrow at 9. You're not going to make it. It's already out, Charles. Welcome home." I turned off the call. The kitchen smelled of coffee. Outside the window, dawn colored the sky with a shade that mixed gold and steel. At that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt the taste of breeding. The reckoning has arrived. And that was just her first act. The courtroom resembled a cold aquarium made of wood and glass, where feelings are exposed under the dim light of fluorescent lamps. The air smelled of paper, ink, and fear. I was sitting at the long table next to Karen, holding my hands in my lap so as not to show the tension. She was unperturbed, as always, restrained, businesslike, focused. Her gaze was directed forward, but I knew that she could feel every tremor in my body, every movement of my fingers hidden under the table. There was a hurricane inside me, but no sound outside. When the doors opened and Charles came in, I felt everything in the room tighten, as if someone had abruptly cut off the air. He was not the person I once loved. Not to those who carried Evan on their shoulders, who fell asleep with me in their arms while it was raining outside the window. In front of me stood a confused man with sharp cheekbones and dull eyes. The protective mask of complacency cracked, and through the cracks I saw fear. Karen stood up. The judge, a woman with short graying hair and a stern profile, nodded at her, encouraging her to begin. "Your Honor, we provide an exhaustive package of evidence, offshore accounts organized to conceal marital assets, a forged letter on behalf of my client sent to the defendant's company, correspondence that records a deliberate conspiracy to undermine the parental rights of the child's mother." Karen laid out the documents on the table, each of which I knew almost by heart. I lived them in my mind over and over again, nights and days, to keep them from being distorted, from being forgotten. Then Charles's lawyer stood up, young, nervous, and hastily hired. He tried to present everything as a misunderstanding, as excessive emotionality, but the judge cut him off. "Advice, I've read the materials. Continue only to the point." Clara testified. Her voice was trembling, but her words were clear. She told me about how Charles hid the money, how he threatened, how he tried to make me unstable in order to deprive me of custody. She wasn't making excuses, she was just talking. And that was enough. When Karen handed the judge a printout from Charles's cloud storage, a file called Custody Strategy, which described steps to discredit me as a mother, she did not hide her disgust. For the first time, I saw in her eyes not only professional rigor, but also something personal. Female. Maybe she was a mother too. Maybe she knew what it was like to fight for her child. The verdict was clear and swift. The court decides to freeze all identified accounts and assets of the defendant, to confiscate his passport until the completion of all financial proceedings, to grant Jenna Brooks temporary full custody of Evan Brooks, to establish alimony payments in accordance with the potential income of the defendant, regardless of his current employment. The case is being referred to the district attorney to review the facts of identity theft, interference in the judicial process, and collusion. I sat in silence, not realizing that I was holding my breath until Karen put her hand on my arm. We both knew it wasn't over yet, but it was the pinnacle. The first real light. Margaret was not in the courtroom. She wasn't invited. She found out about the decision later, and soon the consequences came into her life. When the prosecutor's office confirmed her involvement in document forgery and identity theft, Her name appeared in the headlines. The woman who had kept herself in a halo of secular grandeur for decades was now hiding her face from the cameras. At the country club, where she behaved like a queen, they turned away from her. The reputation built on the facade cracked under the weight of the truth. Charles could no longer pretend to be a victim. The court saw who he was. And the world saw it too. Clara, without waiting for the end of the investigation, went to Portugal alone. I felt no malice or sympathy for her, just empty neutrality. Her role was over. She chose her side, but at least in the final she had the courage to speak. 6 months later, Evan and I moved to Portland. A small apartment on the second floor of a house with a red door and carved shutters became our new beginning. It smelled of lavender and fresh bread. The windows overlooked the park, where in the mornings we fed pigeons and rode a scooter. I returned to work. The publishing house in Portland accepted me with an open heart, offering me a flexible schedule. I edited the texts at night, and during the day I took Evan to kindergarten, where he was already known by name. Life has become simple. But it was in this simplicity that I found what I had been looking for so long: stability. There were no more stomach-churning phone calls. There was no expectation that the ground would give way at any moment. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. One evening, when I was putting Evan to bed, he asked quietly, "Mom, will Dad ever come to visit?" I froze. His voice was calm, without resentment, just childish interest. I ran my fingers through his hair, nuzzled his warm nape. "I don't know, baby," I answered honestly. "But even if not, we'll be fine. I promise." He nodded, yawned, and fell asleep almost immediately. I went out onto the balcony, wrapped in a woolen blanket. The sky was clear, and the stars were low. The city was rumbling somewhere below, but here, in this silence, I finally heard myself. Freedom did not come suddenly. She came drop by drop, in the right to breathe, in the ability to say no, in the choice to remain silent when she used to scream. I went through the storm and survived. I've lost everything, and I've found myself. Betrayal was not the end. It became the starting point. The page that started the new chapter. A chapter in which I'm no longer afraid.